I led leadership development and talent teams and
Mm,
culture, people and culture. So anything related to people and culture, I was doing. Um, but I was able to make that work with my values
hmm
to a certain degree. And I talk about that in the book. There are some things I wasn't able to work, and that's why I'm not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
But there are some things that, like, for example, I was creating careers for people. I was developing, I was doing leadership development and making that accessible to underrepresented folks. Um, One of the companies I worked in, I mean, literally, I did a lot of succession planning globally, and there sometimes we'd be in those meetings, and out of 100 people there were like 2 women, right, that were actually in that pool. And so it was just dire circumstances. And so that was kind of the role that I took on, was like, I went to business school because I really wanted to learn the ins and outs of business, took a lot of entrepreneur classes. And then like I said, I discovered social entrepreneurship, and I'm like, okay, what could I do with this? I'm going to come back to this at some point in my career and see how I can use business to change the world.
Man, I love that. So, a lot of people that listen to podcasts and this show in particular are kind of in that transformational point where I think they're hitting the limit of their values they're willing to sacrifice for a career.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe they've never even had this conversation before and they are opening up to the fact that it doesn't have to be this miserable all the time. For for you, what was kind of the gap between the moment that you started to feel this isn't working for me and the moment that it got so uncomfortable that you felt like you could make a change? What did that gap look like for you?
Oh, that's a good question. One of those corporate jobs. I was loving that job. Then my boss left, my boss's boss left, and all of a sudden, um, I was kind of pushed to the margins. But I was still doing great work, and walked to a performance review, and all of a sudden, suddenly I was a bad performer. I was just like, "Are you serious?" And it was so interesting because that day hadn't happened to me yet, but I knew that day would happen because I'd heard so many stories. And I'm like, that hasn't happened to me yet. It's been more passive aggressive, you know? But I was like, one day this is going to happen. And it did. And so, yeah, I went outside and I cried and I called my old boss that had left. And um, I think in that day, I was like, gosh, I don't really have to do this. Like, and I live in Chicago. So, I was in Chicago in a park, and I saw all these people with all these lives and smiling and just looking happy, and just doing what they want to do. And I was like, I can do that. I can do that. And just that almost happened right at the right time. I know that sounds cliche, but at that point, yeah, that's when I actually ended up going to work at a business school. Um, but before that, I was talking to a lot of tech companies, and I got a couple of offers, but this was the direction I went in, and people would say, "That's the biggest mistake. You can't leave the corporate ship." And I was like,
Yes.
"Yeah," I was like, "I don't know. I'm feeling pretty good about it, and look what it led to." So I guess they were wrong.